My attorney read the paper my son had asked me to sign and looked up at me. "Margaret, did you understand how much authority this gives David?" I said no. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Could my son sell my house? She didn't answer right away. She turned the document back toward herself and ran one finger down the second page. Under ordinary circumstances, that pause wouldn't have bothered me. That morning, it terrified me. Because 3 weeks earlier, David had told me this paper was just a way for him to handle things if I got sick again. Now my daughter was looking at senior communities. My granddaughter had already asked for my china cabinet. And my children were talking about what would happen to my house after I moved. The problem was simple. I had never agreed to move. So I sat across from a lawyer I had hired myself and waited to learn exactly what I had given my son permission to do, and how a 2-night hospital stay had somehow turned into my family planning a future I had never approved. 3 weeks earlier, none of this seemed dangerous. I had spent 2 nights in the hospital after a stomach virus left me badly dehydrated. It wasn't dramatic. No surgery, no fall, no frightening diagnosis. I got sick, waited too long to call anyone, and ended up needing fluids. David drove me home on a Saturday morning. He carried my overnight bag into the house and put it beside the stairs. Then he went straight back outside for groceries. That was David. He was 52 and worked as an operations manager. Give him a problem, and he wanted a procedure for it. By noon, he had soup in my refrigerator, electrolyte drinks on the counter, and a list of my medications written on a yellow legal pad. I was grateful. I really was. Then he sat across from me at the kitchen table. "Mom, we should probably get a few things organized." I looked at him over my tea. "What things?" "Emergency things." That sounded reasonable. I was 79. I lived alone. My husband, Richard, had been gone for 6 years. There was nothing insulting about admitting that someone should know how to pay the electric bill if I spent a week in the hospital. David explained that he and Laura had been talking. That was the first detail I should have paid more attention to. Laura was my daughter, 55, an elementary school administrator. She liked plans almost as much as David did. "What exactly did you talk about?" "Nothing dramatic," David said. "Just what we'd do if you couldn't handle things for a while." For a while, that mattered to me. I wasn't giving anybody control of my life. I was preparing for an emergency. At least that was what I believed. 4 days later, David came back with a folder. He put it between us on the kitchen table. "There are a few forms in here." "A few?" "Mostly routine." I gave him a look. I spent 32 years working in payroll. I had processed benefits forms, withholding changes, insurance documents, garnishments, retirement paperwork. I wasn't frightened by paper. David knew that. So when he explained one document would allow him to handle financial matters if necessary, I wasn't suspicious. I read the first page, then part of the second. There was more legal language than I liked. I asked David what one section meant. "It just gives me room to handle things if you're unavailable." "Unavailable how?" "Hospital, recovery, anything like that." I looked at him. "This isn't you taking over my checking account." He almost laughed. "No, Mom." That embarrassed me a little. The question suddenly sounded foolish. So I signed. That was my mistake. Not because I was confused, not because I couldn't understand paperwork. I simply trusted the person sitting across from me more than I trusted my own discomfort. David took the documents when he left. For several days, nothing changed. Then the questions started. He called Tuesday evening. "Do you know when the property taxes are due?" "Yes." "How much are they?" I told him. The next day, he wanted to know which company carried my homeowner's insurance. On Friday, he came by and asked how old the roof was. "About 12 years." "What about the furnace?" 8. He wrote that down. That bothered me. "Why are you making notes about my furnace?" "I'm just trying to understand what you're dealing with here. I'm dealing with a furnace that works." He smiled. "That's not what I meant." A week earlier, I probably would have smiled back. This time I didn't. He asked whether I knew what the house cost me each month after taxes, insurance, utilities, lawn care, and repairs. Yes, David. You've actually added it up? I looked at him. I worked in payroll for 3 decades. I know. Then why are you asking me like I discovered money last Tuesday? He leaned back. Mom, I'm not questioning you. But he was. Maybe not intentionally. Still, he was. A few days later, David asked if he could photograph my insurance papers and property tax statements. Why? So we have copies. We? He stopped for half a second. Me and Laura. I handed him the papers anyway. That was my second mistake. I was annoyed, but not alarmed. I thought my children were over-planning. I didn't yet understand what they were planning for. Laura gave me the first clue. She stopped by after work one Thursday and brought chicken salad. We were sitting in the living room when she mentioned a woman from her church. Her mother moved into this beautiful senior community near Westerville. I kept reading the newspaper. That's nice. She loves it. They handle maintenance, lawn care, everything. Good for her. Laura waited. I looked up. What? Nothing. You didn't come here to tell me somebody else's mother doesn't mow grass. She laughed. Then she said, I just think places like that can make life easier. I like my life. I didn't say you didn't. And I like my house. I know. I folded the newspaper. Then we're finished. Laura's face changed. Not angry. Careful. Okay. That should have been the end of it. 2 days later, David called and started talking about future maintenance costs. The roof again, the driveway, the upstairs bathroom. You don't need to do everything at once, I said. That's not the point. What is the point? He hesitated. The house may not always make sense. There it was. Not concern about a furnace. Not emergency planning. The house. My house makes perfect sense to me. Mom. No, you asked. I'm answering. He let it go. But after that conversation, something started bothering me. Laura and David had raised the same subject separately. That didn't happen by accident. I wondered what they had been saying to each other. Then my granddaughter Sophie came over on Sunday. Sophie was 25 and worked as a dental hygienist. She had always loved my china cabinet. It stood against the dining room wall. Dark cherry wood. Glass doors. Nothing terribly valuable. But Richard and I bought it when we were 35, and it had followed us through 2 houses and 40 years of family dinners. Sophie was looking at it while I made coffee. Then she said very casually, Grandma, Mom said when you move, nobody else wants the china cabinet. Could I have it? I stopped with the coffee pot in my hand. When I what? She looked at me. When you move. Where am I moving? Her face changed immediately. It was almost painful to watch. Mom didn't tell you? Tell me what? Sophie looked toward the front door as if Laura might somehow appear and rescue her. Nothing's decided. I set the coffee pot down. Sophie. She swallowed. They were just looking at places. Who? Mom and Uncle David. What places? Senior places. I didn't say anything. She rushed to explain. They were just looking, Grandma. They said the house might be too much eventually. Eventually. Yeah. And they're discussing my furniture? Her cheeks turned red. I think they were just talking about what would happen later. Later. That was the moment the entire situation changed. Before Sophie said those words, I thought I had 2 worried children. Afterward, I knew I had 2 children, making plans. There is a difference. Who else knows about this? I don't know. Does David know you asked me about the cabinet? No. Good. Sophie looked miserable. I touched her arm. You didn't do anything wrong. She nodded. But I don't think she believed me. After she left, I stood in the dining room for a long time. I wasn't staring sentimentally at the china cabinet. I was looking at it because something in my mind had shifted. My children weren't discussing whether I might move someday. They were discussing what happened afterward. The house, the furniture, where things would go. And the most frightening part was that none of those conversations seemed to require me. Then I remembered the folder. I found my copy in the small desk in the den. I sat down and read the document differently this time. Not as a mother trusting her son. As a woman reading a document that affected her property, certain phrases bothered me immediately. Financial authority, real property, transactions, execution of documents. I read one section twice, then a third time. By the end, I wasn't sure exactly what David could do, but I was sure of one thing. I had not understood the full scope when I signed it. I picked up the phone. I did not call David. I called an attorney. Her name was Susan Keller. A friend from my retirement group had used her for estate planning. I made an appointment for Thursday morning. I didn't tell either of my children. That was how I ended up sitting across from Susan while she read the paper. Could my son sell my house? She folded her hands. This document gives him broad financial authority, including authority related to real property. Exactly what could happen would depend on the circumstances and how the authority is exercised. My mouth went dry. So the answer is yes? The answer is that this is much broader than simply paying your electric bill while you're in the hospital. I sat back. That sentence hurt more than I expected. Not because David had sold anything. He hadn't. Not because I believed he was planning to steal my house. I didn't. What frightened me was simpler. He had authority, and he was already talking about my house as something that might need to be dealt with. Can I take it back? Yes. That answer changed everything. Susan explained my options. We discussed what I actually wanted. Emergency assistance. Limited access. Clear boundaries. A plan that worked if I truly couldn't manage my affairs. Not a document that gave someone broad authority simply because planning ahead was convenient. I left her office with a list. But before I changed anything, I wanted to know how far my children had already gone. So I called Laura, come by after work. Is everything okay? Yes. It wasn't a lie. I was perfectly fine. She arrived at 6. I put coffee on the table and asked one question. What senior communities have you and David been looking at? Laura froze. That told me more than an answer would have. Mom? Which ones? We haven't made any decisions. I didn't ask whether you made decisions. She stared at her cup. There are a few nearby. How many? 3. 3. Not one casual suggestion. 3. And you've talked about selling my house? We talked about what might happen if you moved. If. Yes. Then why does Sophie think she gets my china cabinet when I move? Laura closed her eyes for a second. She wasn't supposed to say anything. That was the wrong answer. Why not? Because nothing was final. No. Why wasn't I supposed to know? Laura rubbed her forehead. Mom, we were trying to gather information before upsetting you. Information about where I would live? Yes. And information about selling my house? We looked at approximate values. I sat very still. How much? What? How much do you think my house is worth? Mom, you looked. Tell me. She gave me the number. I won't repeat it. The amount wasn't what mattered. What mattered was hearing my daughter quote, a market estimate for the home I was still living in. Then she said something that made the whole situation clear. Nobody has done anything yet. I looked at her. Except plan my life. She flinched. That isn't fair. Isn't it? We're the ones who will have to handle things if something happens. There it was. Their interest. Not money. Not greed. Responsibility. Convenience. Fear. They were frightened that one day my life might become their emergency. So they had started organizing it before I asked. I called David that evening. I saw an attorney today. Silence. Then, why? To review the document I signed. Another silence. You could have asked me. I did ask you. What do you mean? I asked what the document did. And I told you. No? You told me what you wanted me to think it was for. His voice hardened. That's not true. Then why didn't you tell me it gave you authority involving my property? Because this is standard planning. For whom? For families. Mom, my house is not a family account. I never said it was. You're discussing selling it. If you move. I said I don't want to move. He exhaled loudly. This is exactly why Laura and I were trying to do the research first. Why? Because every time we mention anything, you shut it down. Then you had your answer. Armand, he went quiet. I could tell he was angry. So was I, but anger wasn't the useful part of that conversation. The useful part came next. Mom, somebody needs to be able to act if there's another emergency. I agree. Then why are you making this into a problem? Because I agreed to help in an emergency. I did not agree to give you permission to plan around decisions I am still capable of making. You're twisting this. No. I'm finally reading it. He told me the house was expensive. He told me maintenance would increase. He reminded me I had been hospitalized. He said Laura couldn't leave work every time something happened. He said they were trying to prevent chaos. Most of what he said was true. That was what made it complicated. But being right about future problems did not make him right about present authority. Then David said, if you revoke this, don't expect us to magically fix everything next time. I almost answered angrily. Instead, I said, I'm not asking you to magically fix anything. He didn't respond. After we hung up, Laura called within 20 minutes. Of course she did. Please don't turn this into a family fight. That sentence settled something in me, because keeping the peace now meant leaving everything exactly as it was. David would keep the authority. Laura and David would keep planning. I would stay quiet so nobody felt accused. And slowly, their assumptions would become the family plan. I finally understood the real problem. I thought David wanted authority in case I couldn't make a decision. Then I understood he had already started using that authority to plan around decisions I was still perfectly capable of making. The next morning, I called Susan. Let's change it. We did. Not recklessly. Not emotionally. I did exactly what my children claimed they wanted me to do. I planned. We created a narrower arrangement that matched what I actually wanted. Emergency help if necessary. Clear procedures. Defined authority. No broad permission I didn't understand. David's previous authority was revoked. When everything was complete, I asked David and Laura to come to the house Sunday afternoon. They sat across from me at the dining table. The china cabinet was behind Laura. That felt appropriate. David started first. Mom, before we get into this, no. He stopped. I've listened to both of you. Now you're going to listen to me. Laura looked down. I placed the paperwork on the table. The authority I gave David has been revoked. David's face changed. You already did it? Yes. You didn't even discuss it with me? That almost made me laugh. No, David. I discussed it with my attorney. He leaned back. So what happens if you're in the hospital again? I have a plan. I explained it. I wasn't refusing help. I wasn't pretending I would never need anyone. I was simply making sure the help matched my wishes. Then I gave them 3 rules. Nobody discusses selling this house as though it's decided. Neither spoke. Nobody promises my furniture. Laura's face reddened. And nobody researches where I'm going to live without including me in the conversation. David shook his head. We were trying to protect you. I know. That surprised him. I continued. I don't think you're trying to hurt me. I don't think you're trying to steal from me. But you started planning as though my refusal was an obstacle instead of an answer. He looked away. We were being realistic. Then be realistic with me. Silence. Help me prepare, I said. Don't prepare to replace me. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Laura asked, So you're staying here? For now, yes. And if that changes, I will be the first person involved in that decision. David didn't like it. I could see that, but he finally nodded. Not agreement, recognition. That was enough. The next few weeks were uncomfortable. David called less often. Laura stopped bringing up senior communities. Sophie apologized 3 times about the china cabinet until I finally told her she could still have it someday. Someday, I said. Not when somebody else decides I'm finished with it. She understood. Eventually, the family settled into something different. David still helps when the garage door sticks. Laura still takes me to longer medical appointments when I ask. I still manage my own bills. My emergency plan is in place. The difference is that everyone now knows exactly where assistance ends and decision-making begins. My house is still mine. My furniture is still mine. And most importantly, my future is not a family project being organized in another room. David still thinks I underestimate how hard things may become someday. Maybe I do. I still think he moves too quickly from concern to control. Maybe he does. We don't have to agree about that. The boundary doesn't require agreement. It requires respect. If you've ever had an adult child make plans for your money, your home, or your future before asking what you wanted, I'd like to know how you handled it. Would you have revoked the authority the way I did? Tell me in the comments. And if you enjoy senior family stories about family boundaries, property, money, and the complicated conflicts that happen between parents and adult children, please like this video and subscribe to the channel.